I'm Noches Flores, and on my last video, I talked a lot about how the Black Dragon stat block was boring and lame, and then I talked about a variation I created called the Wither Dragon. And for my numbers, the video is doing great. But there's an ancient-sized black-scaled dragon in the room here. Even though I made 4 forms of the dragon and put them out for free, I didn't really talk about the abilities at all, which was the entire point. That being said, if you haven't watched that video, you probably should do so before you watch this one for more context and a better explanation of my argument. But somewhere when I was working on the video, I got a little lost in the sauce, and so I would like to correct that mistake quickly here by going over exactly what the Wither Dragon can do. First off, I didn't really have any issues with most of the stats across the board, so they mostly stayed the same. The main exception to this is hit points. Across the board, they got a little bit of a bump. To be honest, I would still probably double what it is now if it's going to be a boss fight, which most dragons probably are, but to keep it in line with typical stat blocks, I gave it the minimum boost I thought acceptable. If you watched the original video, you would know that crocodiles and alligators were a huge inspiration for the Wither Dragon, so all forms got the acidic amphibious ability, which lets them breathe air, water, and acid. Don't get sciencey on me for why it shouldn't be able to breathe an acid. It's a magical dragon that has an acid breath attack. It's fine. Then, since they are ambush predators, they got a boost to their stealth. While they are submerged in acid or water, they have advantage on stealth checks. Next, we're on to attacks. First off, I never realized it, but the different forms of dragons have really weird and honestly bad scaling for their attacks. The reason I say it's weird is because it seemingly goes against Wizards' own internal rules for the sizes of creatures. But regardless, each attack now scales cleanly, which means that the Ancient Dragon will hit much harder now, so be aware of that. Also, once it becomes an adult, the dragon's innate magic fully suffuses with its body, and its natural weapons are then considered magical. Following the crocodile's hunting strategy, the bite attack will now grapple a creature on a hit as long as the creature is a size smaller than the dragon. However, if it has a creature grappled, it can't use certain abilities, and it severely limits the range of the acid breath attack, but whatever creature is grappled then makes the save a disadvantage. Before we get to the acid breath ability, I'm going to talk about the new attack I gave it, which would be acid spit. If you're within the acid breath's attack range, but the ability hasn't recharged yet, you still do have to worry about acid being sent in your direction. While the damage for this attack does scale well, its accuracy is based off of the dexterity of the dragon, which isn't the greatest. As a result, this is something that Wither Dragons can pull out if they need to for whatever reason. Maybe they need to take out somebody far away but can't close a distance, or perhaps they need to break walls, trapping people inside with them, or just away from their allies, or even setting off traps let off by the ruin's original creators. Next, we get to the acid breath ability, which went through a complete rework because Align is so bad. So I made it good in a way that makes sense. The breath line of the dragon now starts at any point that the dragon can see within range, and it can bend, twist, and turn as much as the dragon can tilt its head. This gives it so much more flexibility than a single line that starts from the dragon and goes in one direction. It is better than a cone in certain points, but I would say that the cone is still generally better overall. That being said, it's at least a competition between the two now. It also leaves a little bit more up to the DM and how they interpret it, in which I'm not always the biggest fan of, but I do think it's much better. Also, it has an acid effect of melting through armor and flesh by temporarily lowering the AC of those who fail a saving throw. The amount it lowers the AC by scales through the different levels of dragon, but to me, this feels like a appropriate way to have acid be effective and be uniquely acid instead of just massive damage. The last change I made to an attack was the tail attack, which can now move a target for 10 feet for every 10 damage dealt in a direction away from the dragon. The dragon does get to choose the direction, so maybe try and stay away from the acid pools in the dragon's lair. Also, it is specifically damage dealt, not damage rolled, so the barbarian and anyone else resistant to bludgeoning damage can have an anime moment where instead of getting thrown away, they slide a bit as they catch the blow. The Frightening Presence ability is the same. I'm gonna be honest, I always feel like this ability is really boring, but in order to fix it, I think I would need to change the entire frightened condition, and also then its interactions with certain abilities, and I would like to come back to this at a later date, and if you would like me to, let me know in the comments, but regardless, it would be too much of a project in addition to reworking an entire dragon to do it all in one change. On to the legendary actions. The detect and tail actions stayed since I think they're fine and honestly a good base ability for dragons to have. However, the Wither Dragon got a fair bit of movement. For example, it got a hide legendary action. If it's lightly obscured, it can move and attempt a stealth check. This is primarily designed to be used underwater or under acid, but there are many reasons to be obscured above ground as well. I did give it the smallest bit of magic by allowing it to cast the Acid Splash cantrip as a legendary action as well. Noshez, is this the 2014 or the 2024 version of Acid Splash? Honestly, your choice. Best I can tell, they are actually identical in function, although the wording is a little weird and I'm not entirely sure on that. But that's the best I can tell, so realistically, whatever one you're using. Then the Acid Rain ability, which is probably my personal favorite. Using this, the dragon flies up and over its enemies while secreting acid from its wings. Anyone below the dragon's movement in this action has to make a saving throw or take acid damage. When a Wither Dragon gains Ancient status, it gets two abilities. The first is the passive of the Siege Monster ability, which lets it deal double damage to structures. And then it gets a new legendary action called Inspire Decay. This means that the dragon can cause a creature to see everyone they know and love disappear in an instant via a hallucination from acidic fumes, forcing them to drop their guard and giving them vulnerability to acid for a short time. Lastly, there are lair actions that allow the Wither Dragons to summon minions, turn areas into difficult terrain, drop ruin debris on their attackers, create pools of acid, and disperse acid throughout the air, causing maximum HP to be reduced when creatures take damage. But yeah, I worked really hard on this stat block, so if you want to download it for free, click the links to my Ko-Fi or Patreon down below. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.